it would have been, today was to be for state representative position 1, which is Mike Chapman versus Sue Forde. Unfortunately, Sue Forde had a prior engagement, so Kathy offered her the opportunity to send us her opening and closing statements, which I will read. So I will go first. We don't need a moderator, obviously, because I would lose. Anyway, I'm going to read the opening statement for Sue, and then it's over to Mike. And after he reads his opening statement, it will basically be a Q&A session. And then when it's time, and Scott will tell me when it's time, then we'll do closing statements.
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sue Forde, running for state representative against Mike Chapman to be your voice in Olympia to help bring positive change to the direction of our state. I've lived, worked, and raised a family in Clown County for 33 years. I have a business background. Since retiring from a 21-year career in the title and escrow business as a certified senior escrow office and manager, I've been a small business owner here for the past 20. I've served as a volunteer administrator and teacher for a teen redirectional program, on the board of the Boys and Girls Club, as Farm Bureau president, and more. You can read more on my website, alexsuford.com. That's all one word, alexsuford, no dashes.com. I was elected to 2 terms as Clown County Home Rule Charter Commissioner. I've been politically active here for more than 20 years, standing for private property and individual rights. We need balance and common sense in our state government. For 16 years, we have had a trifecta, a one-party system. During that time, we've seen a 100% plus increase in the budget spending, and with a $15 billion surplus this last legislative session, no money returned to the taxpayers as other states have done. Mike Chapman and his majority party votes for higher taxes, bigger government, and more bureaucracy. He voted straight party line for a transportation budget that increases your fees and does little to help with our roads and infrastructure. That same transportation budget calls for all electrical vehicles, EVs, in 8 years, while at the same time calling for a takedown of the Snake River dams, which provides approximately 8% of our state's power. It doesn't make sense to follow in the footsteps of California and now Nevada, who are currently advising EV owners not to charge their EVs because of feared brownouts. What happens to the batteries when they are done? Look at the environmental impact of getting rid of those and the potential fire hazards we're now beginning to see happen. We need to restore common sense and balance in our state legislature. I'll vote to lower gas tax, sales tax, give a $250,000 exemption on state property taxes, and get rid of the B&O tax, or at least set it to be charged on net, not gross income. Public school now costs more than $18,000 per student. Folks across party lines agree with my idea for school choice, where the money follows the child for their best education. Parents should choose where to send their children to school. I support our law enforcement and will vote to restore the law so they can defend and protect us and our property. Criminals should be handcuffed, not police. I will strongly defend, as I always have, our constitutional rights. I will work to streamline government to lower building costs and government regulatory overreach in general. I have been listening and will continue to do so to the people of our district, and I will be a strong voice for balance and for common sense representation. I'm Sue Forde for state representative. I ask for your support and your vote in the general election on November 8th. Thank you. Now it's over to Mike.
Laurel did such a great job, actually, just written that statement. She did better than I will in person. So that was clean, smooth, and very clear to the point. And it's one perspective. I am your state representative, Mike Chapman. A couple of things I guess I should address is, you know what? I'm just going to talk about what's good in our, what I think is going good in our community. You know, you look around Port Angeles, and you've seen a new investment in the Boys and Girls Club, and the state certainly had a role in that. You've seen a brand new swimming pool that's kind of a world-class swimming pool. Had an opportunity to help the state have a role in that. Performing Arts Center downtown have a state role of, you know, in helping that. Our local businesses, we were able to, and I'm not sure where the criticism for business taxes comes from, except, I mean, we are cutting business taxes, and we're going to cut them significantly. We see transportation investments. You know, I don't know where, I would think $32 million for new Elwha Bridge was a significant investment in our district. And I would also think the new $30+ million investment between Squim and Blinn to improve that corridor with new safe interchanges, widening of the road is a significant investment in our district. I would also, a number of safety projects over in Jefferson County and in Grace Harbor County. And then we're making a huge investment in replacing fish passage barrier projects. One of the great things that our timber industry's done over the years is they've replaced their fish passage barriers on timberlands, and the state has been a little lax. And so that's a significant portion of our new transportation budget. That's local contractors, along with some, you know, other contractors, but it's a lot of local work replacing these projects, and the contractors are, you've seen it this summer. So we're certainly making an investment in our district. We are cutting small business taxes next year. So if you're a small business owner and you make less than $150,000 a year, you'll pay no P&O. If you make less than $250,000 a year, you'll pay a greatly reduced P&O. We have actually worked with the Auto Dealers Association, of which Bill is a member of, and trying to remove one of the quirks in the law is that if Bill, it was probably a bigger issue, Bill, before the pandemic when you had cars on your lot, but the manufacturers would offer a rebate. So you would pass that rebate on. Well, the state has been taxing that rebate as income twice. I sponsored the legislation twice. It passed unanimously in the legislature, and twice it was vetoed by the governor. So I'm actually working with the Auto Dealers Association to kind of repackage that in a way that the governor will support it. Someday you'll get back to the point where there's probably incentives again and you have cars on your lot. But so we did, you know, I would say we've made a significant investment in Olympic Medical Center, and hopefully Jennifer's filled you in on some of the one of two hospitals in the state that gets a direct appropriation from the state. We repeat that. Olympic Medical Center is one of two hospitals in the state that gets a direct appropriation from the state to lower costs. The other is Grace Harbor Hospital. Gee, I wonder how that happened for someone who's maybe, you know, not like that's it. Like that's really hard to do, to get direct appropriations for only two hospitals in the state. And they're the two most significant hospitals in the 24th legislative district. In the transportation, it's aspirational. With the support of the Auto Dealers Association, with the support of the auto manufacturers, it's an aspirational goal that at some point by 2035, if the manufacturers can make enough cars, we'll probably be selling more, you know, cars. Electric cars will be more, you know, it's not a mandate. It's not a, no fines. If Bill can't get electric vehicles, he's not, it's an ask, it was an aspirational goal. Is that so wrong to have aspirational goals from your state government, for your state government to look forward a few years? I think that's actually a good policy and a good thought process. Trucks are exempt, big rigs are exempt. I mean, we're years away from every vehicle being electrified. But we're also manufacturers and people wanting to buy them. That's, you know, I think hybrids are part of that mix. So from what I understand, you know, we want to sell. The other thing is, don't forget, Tesla has, this is why I asked Bill to come, because I wanted him, you know, help me walk, but Tesla got an exemption from the state. So if you buy a Tesla, you buy direct from Tesla. The auto dealers, they're in our community. Like it's really cool that Bill's son is working for him. You know, we know, you know, Howie's probably got some kids working for him. He's got enough kids, so he's got some kids working for him. Here's my neighbor, so I see it's like, golly, that house is a beehive of activity. And so it's important that they're here. So we don't want to have the auto dealer, and I'm working with the Auto Dealers Association to possibly run legislation to reaffirm the state's commitment to the auto dealer model. We don't want you dealing directly with Ford in Dearborn, Michigan, buying a Ford and just having Ford ship it to you. We want you to go through, Bill wants you to go, buy a Subaru, but we want that dealership model. And those are the issues that sometimes get missed, is what's the nuts and bolts of state government? What do we do, to make our community better? And I think that I'd like to think that I help. And then, a lot of criticism, a lot of things that people are upset about. I get that. We do our best. I think that, I always say that I put the district over my party. It was reported in the paper yesterday on the police reform bills. I wasn't the only Democrat who voted no, but I think I was in the House on a number of those police reform bills. A little bit of a challenge to be the only one in your party to vote no, but they didn't work for our district. They did work in other districts, in other parts of the state. They had some issues that were, and at the end of the day, what happened, what those police reform bills, and I kind of heading off probably what was going to be a question. And Mark Nichols, I see he's on the call, and I don't know if any of the law enforcement folks are. But you can be really grateful on the North Olympic Peninsula that the vast majority of our law enforcement agencies are, quote, accredited. That's a peer review process where standardized policies are put in place, peer reviewed by other law enforcement agencies. It's something Sheriff Benedict put in place, that Port Angeles Police Department put in place, SQUIM. Those policies are the framework, peer reviewed policies, and they already operate under those policies. So the state didn't need to come along. Lots of agencies outside of our district aren't accredited. They had some issues. They didn't have the policies in place. One of my goals was at the time was to let's provide grant funding so that those agencies that weren't accredited can go through the peer review process. A peer review process is a much better process than a bunch of legislators in Olympia trying to write laws to impact. It's much of what Olympic Medical Center deals with. It's much of what Bill deals with. We have to be careful that we as citizen legislators we can't forget to listen to the community leaders. And I guess I think I try to do that as best as possible. And sometimes, we get it wrong, and I'll admit that. So I don't want to talk anymore. My time would be up if my opponent was here and she would have her rebuttal time. I can give her a rebuttal too, if you like. I did that. I actually did that the other night out in Barristone Island. I think I actually got a few votes because of my rebuttal was so good. I think I lost a few votes because my rebuttal was so good. So I guess we'll go to questions. Or you don't want me to keep talking? Yeah.
So beyond fixed passage improvements on state highways, for the next term, I guess, whoever gets elected, what do you see as potential improvements to access to the West End? As an example, as someone that drives out there quite frequently, multiple times a week, there are improvements to 112. However, anyone that drives on 112 and 113 knows that areas are constantly falling into the ravine there, and it's just getting patched over where actual infrastructure improvements are needed. I understand that the Elwha Bridge is going to be a huge cost this next construction cycle. So you think that the bridge is going to take up most of the money we have access to, or is there some sort of aspiration or desire to otherwise improve access to the West End other than the Elwha Bridge?
There's a huge desire, and large amounts of money going to maintain that road every year. In fact, DOT just implemented a number of improvements. In fact, if you drive the West End, you'll see that they have fresh chip seal on all their highways to hold them together better. If you want to move that highway, you're going to have to buy millions of dollars of timberland from private timber companies. And there's a lot of timber folks out there that probably are not enthused about the state highway cutting through their timberlands. So the odds of moving the highway up, and the tribe is not exactly warm and fuzzy about that because some of those are their timberlands. The tribe would like to see the road strengthened in places where it needs to be, But understanding that the geology and the tribe is, I'm working directly with the Makah Nation, and they are not enthused about a brand new highway higher up, because as they say, that has been moving for time immemorial, at least down near where the road is along the shoreline. We can control it, we can maintain it, we can watch what's happening. So moving it inland would be, first of all, it's not gonna happen. But we have money in the budget for repairs. We have money in the budget to work with the tribe. Derek Kilmer's gotten federal money. So it's a huge issue, and that road is open 90% of the time. Now, sometimes it's been dirt in places, and I've driven it a lot myself. We live on the end of the world, as it were. We live on the most north, that highway goes to the most northwest point. I mean, we don't get the 16, 17, 80 mile an hour winds that they get. We don't get the beaten rain that they get. It's amazing that road's in as good a condition as it is, according to the engineers. But lots of money, and this district gets an enormous amount of transportation money for the amount of money we put in. Yeah.
So just administrative note for you online, if you have a question, just go ahead and raise your hand like Carmen did. So Carmen's got a question. She's works on the school board, and you may have seen her in the newspaper quoted with all the stuff going on from the school. So, and she's taking over after me. So Carmen, go ahead and ask your question.
Great. Thank you so much, President Scott. And hi, Mike. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Can you please tell us in your own words what the current state funding model for education looks like, including regionalization, and if you think that's working for school districts like Port Angeles?
See, this is why you want to send just a statement. This is why I don't want to be a campaign manager, which is me. Like, let's be honest, this is a tough question. It'd be good to hear from both candidates, but you're going to hear my side of it. And there's not an easy answer. And what I have to say is we haven't done a good enough job. So there you go. Like, I'm admitting we haven't done a very good job. And I'm admitting that we have failed to a certain degree because of the work that we did to comply with the court case. We put a one-size-fits-all funding model in place. We did that. It was a bipartisan piece of legislation. It was actually a Republican-sponsored piece of legislation. And the reason, and a lot of Republicans voted for the new funding model, is it actually, in some cases, directly benefited their district, the North Olympic Peninsula, because of the way our school districts are set up. It's not working. Case in point, Brendan, again, I shouldn't be saying this right today, but I trust you guys. And no one's gonna not vote for me or vote for me because of what my opponent being here or not. But these are tough issues. So Brendan, we funded school counselors, but the way the funding model is, because it's proportional, Brendan's gonna gets funding for 1/10 of a school counselor. When I met with the Brendan superintendent, she's just like, how do I find 1/10 of a person? I mean, it's like an impossible position to fill. So Carmen, we have more work to do. The North Olympic Peninsula, and specifically probably Port Angeles School District, has not been dealt with as well. SQUIM came out a little better, but some of our more junior, really small school districts, we've made some good progress. A couple of years ago, we were able to change the timber dollars that are harvested in the community now stay with that school district. They used to go into a pot and then they were redistributed statewide. Kevin Vandewey and I will run, so we share natural resource committees in the House and Senate. We're going to work with the superintendent of public instruction to run a bill or a budget proviso. For operating dollars, the timber dollars stay here. For school construction, the timber dollars that go into school construction have been leaving the area and funding schools. So Issaquah and Mercer Island have, because they have passed bonds, they have really good schools, they have gotten some of our timber dollars. And so we want to change it where those timber dollars will stay in local communities. Then when the school district needs to run a bond, they can actually direct those dollars to lower the cost of the bond. So we did it for operating my first year in the legislature because it was a huge issue for me. And honestly, we just kind of forgot about the school construction piece of it. Again, can't get it all right. I mean, if Jennifer asked a question, there's things that we haven't gotten right for the hospital. And if Norm asked a question, there's things that we don't get right for the timber industry, but we try to support it as much as we can because it's a huge economic driver. And certainly Bill would have critiques of what we do for his business. And Todd and the media. I mean, everybody has, like, nothing's perfect, but we do look at these things. So,
I was up first,
yeah.
You're behind you.
but no. You're back.
Are you gonna do a rebuttal?
No, I wanted to ask you to expand on an aspect of the school funding issue, which is something I mentioned to you earlier. I think one of the big challenges facing our district and other districts is the urban-rural divide, which I believe is more cultural than political. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers for legislators in the 24th to advocate for us. And it sounds like you've been pushing back on that. Could you speak to that roadblock a little bit, please?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this is just, let me say something that has nothing to do with your question. And I'm a politician, I'm really good at that. This district had more voter turnout than any legislative district in the primary in the state. This district will have more, probably will either be first or second. It's consistently first or second for the number of registered voters per capita and the number of voters. This isn't a brag. This is just pure numbers. No matter what happens, the winner of my race, whoever wins, I want to be, in the past, it's been me, whoever wins this race will get thousands of more votes than legislators from other districts, like numerous, even in numerous, many of thousands. In the primary, in a contested, three-way contested race, I myself got more votes than were cast in some legislative districts. What does that have to do with your question on the rural-urban divide? The next 3 districts are all out of the I-5 corridor. Some of the more rural districts, and I'll point you to the Yakima area, it is shocking how few people vote in their legislative districts. So when I stand up in Olympia as an endangered species in America now, in American politics, a rural Democrat is a completely endangered species. This is the last legislative district held by majority Democrats that is a completely rural area in the state of Washington. But when I stand up, I have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have voted for me versus some of my colleagues that don't. And I think the difference is that when I say this is going to work for rural communities or it's not, I know I have the wind of the community support behind me. And I think your voice, and it's recognized in Olympia. How is it that we get money for the hospital? Because of the support that you give your legislative colleagues, because of the voice of that power, that number of voters, a district that does not fit where the votes come from in the state of Washington. And all you have to do is go to the Secretary of State's website, pull up the last election. You can pull up every race by, like you're going to do that, but I do. Every race by legislative district and see how many votes were cast and those sorts of things and compare them to the 24th. So I think that there is a rural-urban divide, but our district does not buy into the victimization, the victim mentality. You all are living thriving, happy, strong, prosperous lives. Probably, if I could synopsize it, kind of like, yeah, I want government to work. Just don't invade my life too much. Yeah, I want the roads fixed. I want the roads plowed. I want the sheriff funded. I want the prosecutor funded. I want the courts funded. I know people need drug addiction problems. I want the hospital to make sure they have their doors open, but quit regulating everything so much. So we had a bill last session that was going to dictate to OMC how many nurses they had to have on staff at all. It was the nurse staffing bill, and it was a huge issue. And out of the Seattle area, certainly, there were legislators, because in those hospitals, they're for private, their CEOs make a ton of money. I mean, we're a public hospital. So when Steve and Senator Vandeweghe and I kind of pushed back on that, the power of this district allowed us to say, you know, that's not going to work for OMC. And at the end of the day, the bill did pass the House by like 1 vote and didn't pass the Senate because it wasn't going to work in the rest of the state and the voices that we had. Now, if we were, I'll just leave it. That's a long answer, and I took a lot of time. Yeah, Norm.
Mike, many of the states in the union put together some type of tax rebate or tax cut during all the midst of the COVID issues and the pandemic and the downturn in the economy. And there's little of that. You did talk about B&O tax in Washington, where there could have been some opportunities. And I'm just curious as to why that didn't seem to arise. You know, we had a large surplus in the state, budget surplus. But it seems like that it hasn't been squandered, but it hasn't also come back to the city. What is your thought on that?
Surprisingly, I have a few.
I'm not surprised at all.
I'll keep it. I'll actually refer to my notes, so I'm specific. Next to the small business tax break, and you know, this was the title of the bill, and people looked at titles, and sometimes they, you know, the title of the small business tax credit was, quote, providing substantial and permanent tax relief for small businesses to mitigate structural deficiencies in Washington's business and occupation tax and lessen long-term negative economic consequences of the pandemic that have disproportionately impacted small businesses. That was a Democrat-sponsored bill that passed unanimously with a very short debate. That's a really good piece of legislation. Actually, will really help. Doesn't help the Seattle I-5 corridor, even though it was sponsored by a I-5 corridor legislator, but it helps our rural communities, and it's permanent. Recently, in the Seattle Times, this is a direct quote from the Seattle Times editorial, speaking about the working families tax credit that was also enacted. That amazingly, during this season of campaigns, maybe my friends on the other side of the aisle don't want to talk about it. And yet, this is the crazy part of politics. Seattle Times, quote, Representative Drew Stokesbury, Republican Enumclaw, pointed to helping pass, this was in his endorsement review by the Times, pointed to helping pass a working families tax credit in which families with 3 or more children will receive up to $1,200 a year, depending on their income level. Representative Stokesbury, working with Democrats, authored a last-minute amendment that gave the family tax credit additional funding, which it did not have despite being signed into law a number of years earlier. The Democrats, in our wisdom, before I got to Olympia, passed the working families tax credit. Actually, Lynn Kessler was a huge sponsor of that. You remember, immediately after they passed that bill, the Great Recession hit. So it literally was never funded. So Republican Representative Stokesbury said, dang, this is a good bill. It's going to help my district. It's going to help a lot of rural districts. It's going to help a lot of working families, and I want to fund it. And he took the reins, and the Seattle Times gave him credit. So the statement that we didn't cut taxes, which I believe was in a statement you heard earlier, isn't even willing to give credit to Representative Stokesbury. But it takes me standing up here reading from the Seattle Times to give credit to the Republican who drugged the Democrats to the table, the budget team, to say we're going to fund a working families tax credit. That may be one of the great problems with our politics these days, that we're so locked into Democrats never give a tax break, Republicans, why I'm giving the Republicans credit for funding the tax credit that the Democrats a decade ago put in place. Finally, the surplus was a surplus. And like many states, that was a federal government surplus. Congressman Derek Kilmer, working with more than once, has sent money back to the state for public infrastructure. Some states chose to cut their state tax, which is ongoing funding, and backfill it with the federal law. We have chosen to invest in the future of our public infrastructure, and there is a significant amount of federal dollars, one-time dollars, that are going into public infrastructure. Should we have cut more taxes? Maybe we didn't raise a gas tax. We didn't raise it, gas tax, we cut small business and we cut working families, and then we invested the rest as directed by the federal government. Our attorneys, we had this debate. We had a sales tax holiday. We were going to run a 3-day sales tax holiday, and we decided to put that money into the small business. But we had a debate, and our attorney said, you know, you're going to run afoul taking federal dollars and not spending it for what the federal government, because the federal government gave us that surplus. Finally, also reported by the Seattle Times, I think I have the quote here. They gave credit to the legislature for putting more money in the rainy day fund than has ever been in the rainy day fund ever. So this argument that's my side of the story, backed up by facts from the Seattle Times. Again, I can start sending statements. No. Because this is the job, right? This is the job. Whether I'm here at Rotary or whether some of you travel down to, hey, look, Jennifer's being quiet, but she just had me and Steve for an hour last Friday in Squim, listing out 3 pages of concerns from the hospital. 3 pages. And then she will travel down multiple times during session. If you can't engage and take the criticism and say this policy is not going to work and this funding's wrong, and you know, then it's not the right job. Like these are challenging issues. The answers aren't easy. And certainly we get a lot of input, but your community, you're all engaged. I mean, the minute I left Bill and some of the conversations we had about the dealer model, I made a phone call to Scott Hazelgrove, who's the contract lobbyist for the Auto Dealers Association. I'm going to get Scott up here. I'm going to get Bill and Scott, hopefully Dan, hopefully Howie in the room and figure out what do we do to protect the dealer model. But I don't do that alone. And I don't just have a glib answer. Like it's this, you have to like be able to work with people and listen to people's stuff. Go ahead.
I would really be interested in the state support for bike trails and just other transportation besides just cars. The trail from Port Townsend out to the coast would be absolutely amazing. I used to ride from here to swim to work, and the trail was just unbelievable. I took my daughter-in-law one time. She said, "I can't believe this is your ride to work." We've been other places in the world, and you know, it's just awesome what that whole bicycling culture does. Fitness, environment, taking congestion off the roads and parking. Culturally, you're actually, you know, interacting with the people you're passing by, etc. We used to do a bike trail in Wisconsin that's 130 miles long, and I tell you, the city parks along the way where those people are during the summertime is just amazing with all of the people hanging out together, and it's pretty cool. I would love to see it go to the coast. I know there's all sorts of obstacles. It's going to take another 20 years or something. I'm not sure. But what's the kind of state perspective on that? A tiny percentage of all this transportation money for cars, they'll never be enough, right? It's unbelievable, the congestion. But bicycles, if you could do something there, would be very helpful, and it would make this area, I think, a mecca for that kind of travel. And bicyclists are not your troublesome crowd. You know, they're the people you want in the area. They got money, light, they keep things clean.
Well, I'm not, when I was a county commissioner working with Norm, working with Green Crow, we and with the help of state and federal funding, I mean, we have built a world-class Olympic Discovery Trail. And the timber companies significantly worked, especially through their lands. They have some protections in place that when active logging is going on, they may have a right to or fire season, but generally we have miles and miles and miles of the Olympic Discovery Trail, and it won't be 20 years before it goes all the way out to the coast because of the cooperation that we were able to work with the private landowners to secure that. Also, Senator Murray has actually, you know, been a great partner. You know, the Olympic, just if you look back, and I think Todd will remember, and if you did a Google search in the Peninsula Daily News, I believe you would find at one point the Olympic Discovery Trail being referred to as a boondoggle. And I once remember when I was a county commissioner, I had a lady in my office, vehemently opposed to the Olympic Discovery Trail. It was going to bring all this crime and all these issues. I also believe if you look when realtors advertise, they, you know, how many times have you seen a house backs to the Olympic Discovery Trail? I believe we have a world-class marathon that comes here. We have other events, and generally, so we have done, you know, we have our very, you know, but, and it's not done. But again, I do want to give credit. We wouldn't be near as far along if private landowners hadn't opened up their land under a public easement. No, I don't believe Maryland Ring got a dime. That was, we built it, but you don't get like, we're not paying you. I mean, if it's a lease payment, it's like nothing. I don't think
It's not
there's no
lease.
lease.
There was a compensation. I don't recall.
Pretty minimal.
Yeah.
And not an ongoing compensation
No.
like growing trees.
No.
And Norm spent hours, God bless him, negotiating with former Commissioner Doherty. You guys know Mike, I mean, he's like gonna grind you down, but so that's probably why Norm's smiling a lot more now that he's retired. But anyway, Green Crow. So the timber company, along with, along with right away. So more work to do. Long answer. Long answer, but people need to remember, and Todd knows what I'm talking about. People need to remember the history of that. And that initially the rails to trail, there was a lot of pushback in this community, a lot initially. And if it hadn't been, I believe if it hadn't been for Maryland Ring and a Green Crow and the Olympic Discovery Trail marathon, first one was what, 2002? Larry Little comes into the county commission. He says, I got this idea. And we're like, who the hell's going to come here and run a marathon? Like, well, they're going to come, trust me. And I believe Jennifer's run that a few times. I ran it a long time ago,
So, Grant will take the last question, then we'll do closing.
One of the tricks, if y'all run for office and you're ever in a debate by yourself, one of the tricks you'll learn is that you skip really long answers to topics you know a lot about. And I'm trying to avoid so that the questions can come. So just put that in the back of your mind, should you ever be up in this situation.
So really quick, Mike, thanks for your support of law enforcement. Been great. Keep doing that. And then my question, electric cars, do they pay any road tax?
They pay an additional taxation
Once
license fee, a yearly license fee. I get a lot of emails from people who don't think that's fair because they're saving the planet, the rest of us are not. It's kind of a esoteric. Here's a really interesting, polling can be all over the place, but there are times where polling is like, I get it. And I support this. This is what I support. They did a poll, who would support more electrification of the fleet, even if it meant with an additional fee. And electric car owners, if they knew the fee was going to double, still it was well over 60, 65, 70% supported additional fee to move the public to electric vehicles. And people who drive internal combustion engines were opposed, even when the fee increase was commensurate with a gas tax decrease. So we're kind of like polarized like on this issue. So if it meant that you pay less gas tax, but the electric vehicle, but if we were, electric vehicles are going to pay more, people were still kind of opposed to that. I think they didn't think maybe that the gas tax would really be, I don't know. So
That's just real quick. There was a study done a few years ago about kind of charging per mile. They had people actually put the meters in their car.
that also folds really well with electric vehicle owners who would pay more per mile. It does not pull very well with people who.
But did that just die?
No, it's still being studied. There's no, well, you never know, but I don't think the public wants government tracking them where they drive. So I think we'll probably stick with the license fee for now.
The license fee, they want to catch up. Years ago, we voted $35. It went to 137. July 1st, it's down $227 for our area. We're the lowest in Western Washington. So it can be as much as $500-600 for Seattle customers over here. Use large vehicles. How does this keep jumping up as you can vote $35?
So you're right. And it's been because of the courts have said it's generally been thrown out by the courts, the legislature has ignored it, the funding. And so your fees have gone up. In not passing new gas taxes, we added some fees. I will say, and I've been roundly criticized for not following the will of the voters. I will say anecdotally, the 24th legislative district didn't vote for $35 car tax, the entire district. So sometimes, I don't know.
I know the state is funded, but it seems like.
So this last package was definitely, we didn't want to raise gas taxes. And so it was a series of funding increases. And it was not insignificant. The other thing is, we can't bond anymore in transportation. You can't bond unless you have a 2/3 vote. And we're probably in a period in our politics, we're getting a 2/3 vote to agree that today's partly cloudy is getting almost impossible. So in not being able to bond in order to actually have significant money to actually do something and not wanting to raise gas taxes. And if you remember, there was a kind of a goofy idea that we were going to tax Oregon extra money to come drive on. That didn't work out as the interstate. So we ended up with some fee increases, some fee increases of which the licensing was significant. Others are not as significant, but we can't bond. So it's literally pay as you go. And yeah, I don't look, I'll be honest, I voted with that with one finger down my throat, kind of a gag reflex. But I also was able to continue funding, making sure the funding for the Elwha Bridge stayed in the package, continue to bring new funding in for the swim to blend package, continue to make sure there's funds for safety projects. We're going to work on resurfacing through the Morse Creek, and God, bring in some landscaping. Like, what the hell happened there? Morse Creek, I'm embarrassed to fund the first half of that project. It looks like crap, Bill. I mean,
I didn't fit it.
so Senator Van de Water on. So if you vote no, it wasn't my plan, it wasn't my package, but if you vote no, it's really, you kind of have to, you're not going to get your projects. Let's just be honest. It's pretty tough.
So let's do this. Let's go ahead and go with closing comments, and then keep it open if you're okay with that. Mike, for additional questions?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I get paid to answer questions.
So
I don't get paid to answer them well, but.
So we'll do closing comments, and then Mike, it's a huge honor for you to be here, so.
For him or
Okay, so here is Sue Forde's closing statement. Our state budget has more than doubled since 2013. With a $15 billion surplus this year, did Mike Chapman and his majority party give us taxpayers any relief? No. Inflation is at a 40-year high, yet they raise taxes and fees. Who does that hurt the most? I'm running to help reduce the cost of living by lowering taxes and streamlining government agencies. Our children are precious, and I will work for school choice where the money follows the child for their best education. I will vote to restore our law enforcement and limit the governor's emergency powers. I offer a clear choice. I will work for a more accountable government with transparency, common sense, and balance. I will continue to listen to you and be your voice in Olympia. Please visit my website at electsueforde.com and follow me on Facebook at Elect Sue Forde. I ask for your support and your vote in the general election on November 8th. Thank you.
Real quick, Sue's right. I didn't cut the fund the working families tax credit. Republican Drew Stokesbury did. That's significant that I'm giving him credit while being accused of not supporting cutting taxes. The $15 billion surplus, most of that came from the federal government, directly earmarked for public infrastructure, and we put a significant more money in the rainy day fund than ever before. And you can be proud that our bond rating as a state is as strong as it's been. Our pension rating as a state is as strong as it's ever been. To a certain degree, we are running state government with those things in mind, and we have a lot of advisors that watch and make sure. I don't think people realize there aren't 2 or 3 legislators in a room just passing a multi-billion-dollar budget. The state treasurer, Mike Pelliciotti, who was a former AG, state treasurer's office, the state auditor's office, the office of budget management, the folks that do our bonds as a state. I mean, they are constant. We have so many sideboards. The other thing is we have to budget on a 4-year cycle. We have to. It's part of an initiative to set up the rainy day fund. So our budget folks are trying to build a budget. It's called the 4-year outlook. And they have all these professionals kind of guiding them. Yesterday or 2 days ago, the economic forecast came out. That didn't come out from politicians. That comes out from the state economist, and he's showing a little bit of a slowing. But that 4-year outlook, that's the number that shows where we're going as a state. Then finally, this state is growing. Hate to tell you, but people want to move here. Like, we live in a really growing, prosperous state in a really growing, prosperous area with, and so that generates additional tax revenue because people come here and spend money, and that generates additional, but also generates additional services. So I think we did, I actually think we did a pretty good mix coming through the pandemic of investing in the future, putting money into public infrastructure, some targeted tax cuts, finally on tax cuts. I mean, it's not here. I was able 2 years ago to secure, so our mill with McKinley and Port Townsend Paper, they have a preferential B&O tax rate. It was going to expire in 2025. And McKinley was just getting operating. They kind of came to the legislature and said, gosh, we're not sure if we're really, you know, how much our tax is going to go up. And so I said, that's ridiculous. They shouldn't have to be worried about if their taxes are going to go up in 2 or 3 years while they're investing millions of dollars. So I passed a piece of legislation. I was a sponsor. It passed unanimously. And this time the governor signed it. It moved the preferential tax rate out to 2045 or I think 2048. It kind of a generational movement. Like, I won't be in the legislature. I may not even be on earth when it expires. So it's kind of a long term. We also passed a bill to, they pay less for their hog fuel that they run the mill. You know, we passed a piece of legislation to extend that out. I mean, we actually work with our, you know, we did, you know, we're working with the auto dealers. We also passed, and I can't remember, Bill, we passed another bill that helped you incrementally. It's never enough, right? It's just never enough, but gotta go. Give the time out. All right. Thanks, you guys. It's been fun.
Any other questions for Mike? We're good? All right, Mike, thanks a million for joining us this morning. If you can come every Friday, because our attendance is in the roof, we'd appreciate it. We have a tradition that just pick one of these blue tickets. And again, thanks for coming. The last three is 570.
Hey, right here.
Oh, there you go, Grant. And up here at the cards, you're looking for the ace of spades.